Okay, I've turned myself around slightly because this is such a big bag. It's kind of difficult to do on my desk because you can't see it. So this is the exterior of my bag. You can see I've got that seam at the back there. I'm just going to kind of grip that between my knees. And then I have my, let's just get rid of that thread. My bag lining that I've completed. Now, open the zipper on the bag lining so that your zipper pocket is open. You should be able to put your hand right the way through and into the bag. Open your zipper. I'm going to say it just one more time. Open your zipper. If you don't open your zipper, then you will need to make sure that you have one of those handy because you're going to need it. So take your lining and pop your lining inside of your exterior. Now what we're going to do is we're going to match this. What I haven't done is done my central marks. I do apologise. Oh, I have done it. Look at that. You will have marked the centre of your facing panel, and the centre of your facing panel has to go matched up with that side seam. So that seam on the exterior will go against the centre of the lining. The opposite side will go against the other side. So we're just going to, we made those central marks on the exterior when we first started. So I've got my quarter mark there, and I'm going to put my lining seam on that quarter mark on the exterior. My faux leather, obviously I couldn't press it, so I'm just going to push it open with my fingers and pop a clip on it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to ease the rest of that top in. They are exactly the same length, so there should be no reason why they don't fit. And you can put as many clips or as few clips as you want. Should all nicely go together. Let's just turn it around. It is quite bulky to do because it is such a big bag. It's not actually that big when you're using it though. It just feels big when you're making it because it's made out of just effectively two large pieces of fabric. And there we go. So that's completely clipped. I know some people like to put hundreds of clips in. I put a few, but I don't put hundreds, it has to be said. And we're going to now stitch all the way around the top. And because I don't have a free arm, I have to stitch from the inside. If you've got a free arm, you should be able to fit this easily over the free arm on your machine. So I'm now gonna, oops, I seem to have a lamp in the way. Let's just, sorry, move that. So you won't actually see where I'm stitching because I will be stitching inside of the bag. Seam allowance for this is given in the pattern. Again, you shouldn't be stitching on your deckerville. Your deckerville should be out of your seam allowance for this. You just kind of pull the bag around so that you can get to it. You're in charge. The bag is not in charge. When you get to the seam allowance on your facing, make sure you try and keep that seam allowance open as you stitch across it to reduce the bulk in that top seam. And we've offset our seams so that we don't get a big thick area. So we've got one of the seams at the front, one of the seams at the back. If you have them both together, it can get quite bulky, and especially when you're top stitching, you just don't need that. So that's why we've offset everything. So we're back to where we started. Let's just move that around a little bit. And what I'm going to do is grade that top seam. So it means rather than cutting all of the seam allowance away, I'm going to cut some of the seam allowance away. So in this instance, I'm only going to cut this faux leather piece, which is my facing piece. I'm going to cut that shorter. This just gives you a slightly, I'm taking it down by approximately half. This just takes the bulk out of the top of the bag. Otherwise you can end up with it looking a bit kind of, well, just a bit bulky. I'm not sure what else another word to describe it. It just doesn't look so tidy. It needs to be quite a streamlined top. Don't go too close to the stitching. So reducing it by half is quite sufficient. And you can either reduce the inside or the outside. If you've got one part that's faux leather or anything like that, then, or something that doesn't fray, that's the easiest bit to reduce. Doesn't matter whether that's the inside or the outside. If you've got two parts that are fabric, it makes no difference. It's just about reducing the bulk in that top seam so it sits beautifully when you turn it and top stitch. And that's the bit we're going to do in a minute. So I'm just going all the way around, reducing that seam allowance on my lining panel. So this is the facing bit that's attached to the top of my lining, by approximately half. And I don't mean half an inch, I mean half of the actual seam allowance. There isn't half an inch of seam allowance, so now if I show you there, you can see it's not cut very straight, but you can see that this is the exterior, this blue is the exterior, and this is the facing panel, so it's cut shorter. So now we're going to do the bit that most people get quite anxious about, especially with a bag this big. We're going to pop our hand into that pocket, which you will have opened, and I'm going to take my hand right down to the bottom of the bag, and I'm going to grab the bottom of the bag, and I'm just going to carefully and slowly ease the bottom of the bag back out through that pocket. Now I've used fairly thick faux leather on the bottom, I've used foam, I've used Decaville, and if I can get this through, then you can get anything through, I promise you. This is not, it does take a bit of doing, and you have to kind of pull and push and pull and push, hence the way people refer to it as birthing, because it's a bit like that. Except I don't remember there being much pulling when I was having my babies, but there were times when I probably asked them to. So just keep going, and eventually it'll kind of just pop, and you'll think, oh! And there it was, it popped. So now I have the lining out here and the body here, and it's all scrunched up. So I'm going to put my hand in so that I can shape that bottom piece. You might need to press the exterior, that's fair enough. You'd be a bit scrunched if you'd been squashed through a hole that size too. But you just want to press it into shape, push everything out so that the base is nice and circular and everything's kind of sitting nicely. Roll that bottom seam again between your fingers to make sure that the bottom is sitting on the bottom. and then we're going to push the lining back inside of the bag. So just not quite sure what I've done there. So I'm going to push my lining back through. I pushed it back through my pocket, that's why. I'm just going to zip up my zipper pocket because I've just pushed the lining back in through that, and that's not what I want to do. I want to push it into the bag. And again, we're going to roll this top seam so that the lining, so this facing panel is sitting just slightly inside. So you can, if you look from the outside, you can't see any of the lining. If you look from the inside, you can just see a tiny bit of the exterior. So just use your fingers to roll that top edge so that the facing panel sits nicely inside of the bag. You shouldn't see any of the facing panel from the outside. You will get flashes of it because this doesn't have a fastener per se. When it's done up, it's gathered, and you will see little bits of the facing with the gathering. And that's why I quite like using the faux leather, because actually, effectively, what I've done on the bottom is faux leather, so it's kind of like an accent, and this just kind of follows that. I could have just used the denim, the same as I've used on the outside. It's very much a personal preference, and this is what I was asked for, so this is what I've done. Not very good at doing this, I'm told, but there are occasions when it's worth it. So there we go. Now I've got my lining and my top piece all sorted. I will need to iron the outside. Now, depending on what sort of machine you've got, you may be able to top stitch from the outside. I can't, so I am going to actually have to change my bobbin thread to red. Otherwise I've got a lighter colour on my bobbin at the moment, which is fine for where I'm constructing, but because I want a top stitch, I want red on the inside and on the outside. So let's just change that, and I reckon I've got enough thread on there, so I'm going to play bobbin roulette. We've all done that. It's worth checking your bobbin at this point, ladies and gents, because there's nothing quite like getting halfway around and realising you've run out of thread. I know I've shown you how to fix skip stitches and things, but it's probably easier not to. What have I done now? So we're now going to top stitch around the top edge of our bag, and as I say, I have to do mine from the inside because I don't have a free arm. I am going to start at the point where that central seam is on the outside. So the seam allowance for top stitching is written in the pattern. I will probably do a couple of lines of top stitching because I do like a bit of top stitching, so I will probably do a quarter and an eighth. And again, manipulate your bag round so that you can do your stitching if you're stitching from the inside. Remember, if you're stitching from the inside, whatever colour thread you have on your bobbin is what will show on the outside. it's always worth keeping that in mind, because there have been occasions where I've actually forgotten that and I have perfect stitching on the inside, and then I look on the outside and think, no, because I'm a great one for not having the same colour thread on the top and bottom, especially if I'm shooting videos, because it's easier for you to see which thread is which when I've got 2 different colour threads on. I've backstitched. I would normally bury my threads, it has to be said, but because I've literally landed in the same hole, I've actually got away with that. Force of habit, and I should have buried my thread. So I'm going to do a second line of stitching around the top. And then I will use those marks that we made on our facing panel to make my grommets, to outfit my grommets. Now I'm not going to show you me fitting all of the grommets, because I've done a video already earlier on in this pattern for fitting grommets. So the next video will be our rope. So I'm just going to finish my top stitching and then we'll put the rope in.